So here we are. Hi, Mark,
Hi.
and welcome to our first That ILK podcast. I'm hoping we're going to talk about nutrition and our food habits, how we can get incrementally better, how repeat serial diet testers like me can actually progress with our diet plans. So please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Mark Tiffney. I'm a personal trainer, fitness coach. I've been in the industry for about 15 years now. That it doesn't feel like it, but it's time flies, I guess. And given that I had a career before this, which was in architecture, and that lasted about 6 years, it does make me incredibly old now. Yeah, so I moved into this industry because I kind of felt like I was making a big difference to people. I'd made a difference to myself, and a few people had asked me to help them out, and I sort of got more joy out of that than working as an architect. And then the sort of 2008 crash kind of gave everything a bit of a mix up, and even though I wasn't really in fear of losing my job at the time. It just seemed like a good time to jump because I could have been pushed. So I've been doing that ever since. I worked as a PT for about 3 years, just renting space. Then I opened my own gym and ran that for about 9 years. And in the middle of that somewhere, I did do coaching, which I started to find I was getting a bit more joy out of than having to manage a building. And so that has ended up being the thing that I've focused a little bit more on. On top of that as well, I've done some writing. So I've got articles online. I've written for a few magazines and things like that. And essentially anything that I can put out there that's helpful to people, that actually makes a difference, because I feel that the industry itself, the values of the industry is a very good thing. And it's something that should be encouraged. The problem with it is it's also a very easy thing to fall into as something that seems profitable, something that seems like you can just make money off of it. And there's quite a lot of things out there, and I think we're probably going to touch on a few of those things today. They're things that I'd rather see undone as best as possible, so that people that actually have drive and ambition and the enthusiasm to do something don't then sort of get guided in the wrong direction, and as a result of that end up in a position where they're kind of sullied by the whole thing or feel sickened by it, and then give up. I'd rather we increased joy in general, especially at the moment with everything that's going on. Anything we can do to raise happiness in people is definitely a good thing. And anything that we can do to increase people's general immune system at the moment is certainly something we should all be encouraging.
So I thought this was a good moment to talk about this topic, the topic of nutrition, because maybe many of us had a New Year resolution around our food habits. And now, as we know, after a few weeks in, your commitment tapers off and your motivation kind of wanes. And this is something that definitely happened to me. I think I've been reasonably successful a couple of years ago with a program but it only got me so far. Mm-hmm. So I was food journaling. I was limiting the number of calories I took in. I was trying to also shift towards more fruit and veg in my diet. And it worked well for about 3 or 4 months. I think I lost about 2 stone, and then I hit a brick wall. And it had already been really tough. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't easy. There were days when I felt really hungry, or, I went through different challenges, but as long as I saw results, that all went great. And then when I hit that plateau, it came at a really tough time, when I was like, but I did so well, and I'm continuing to be committed to the rules, and I'm really trying. What's going on? So then I thought I'd better try and join a gym, because I'd been focusing on my calories for a while. But that just turned into an even harder situation, in which I was even hungrier, and also the training at the gym was really, really tough. I ended up going on a summer holiday, and then the whole thing tapered off. I mean, I picked up a few good habits, and I still try to, although I'm no longer counting calories, I am looking at my daily fruit and veg intake, and try to look at my plates, look at the size of my plates, and also look at the composition, so that I have a lot of colorful vegetables. But I still feel like a failure. So that moment for me was like, this is not working for me. Clearly, I'm sacrificing so much, and I'm putting so much effort in this. Why is this not? Have you encountered this situation? What do you advise?
Yeah, you could have probably put that label, that story, and attached it to about half the population, to be honest. It happens every year. I have actually, I did an article on it a while back. Originally, it was written for a magazine, then I adapted it and put it up on our own website, which is on dcsfit.com/goal setting. But it was predominantly about New Year's resolutions. And a term that I sort of tried to use at the time was a thing called emotivation, emotional motivation, the thing that's going to carry you forward. It's emotional motivation that gets you into that in the first place. And it's usually because it's just the end of the year. And the way the year seems to be set up seems to lend itself exactly to that. You've got Christmas that comes a week before New Year, where there's lots of eating and drinking and merriment, and most people will just say, yeah, I'll start in the new year because it's quite soon. And then you have the period up to New Year where a lot of people are off work and then just thinking, no, I'm just going to relax now, but I'll get into it in the new year. Then quite often happens is we get to January, and obviously not this year, but people will overindulge quite a lot at New Year. Well, hopefully not this year. Then we get to the start of the next year, and then gyms tend not to be open, and things can't really get started for the first couple of days. Then a lot of people go back to work, and you've got a lot of work on because you've been off work quite often for a week or two. Depends on what industry you're in, obviously. So the result of that is you've got a backlog to try and deal with. So then that now becomes the thing. I'll deal with that first. And then it becomes February before anybody's really got any time to think about it. And the problem with that is that people still want to get started. So they still want to do something. So they kick in with something. But all those things give you very little time to think about what it is you're going to do, what your plan is, why are you doing what you're doing, or is it just because you feel a bit garbage because you've eaten so much and you've been so lethargic and you just feel bad. And then the easiest thing to do is to jump on the bandwagon of what somebody else is doing and just follow what they're doing. Most of the time that'll end up being somebody you know. So if it's somebody you work with or somebody you know quite well and they've been going to the gym for years, now you just want to be able to do what they've done, but you want to be able to do it in a week. So you jump into that. The alternative is if you don't have someone like that, then you follow somebody on TV or in the media or something like that, and then you get this glorified version of what they've done. You don't get the true ins and outs of their daily lives. Not to mention the fact that usually a media personality, their job is to look good, and they're probably getting paid to be in this magazine or whatever. And so it becomes this financial incentive to do it. I mean, if your entire job was just to be healthy, then I'm sure you could put a lot of time into it. And especially if you can get trainers handed to you, or you can get dietitians handed to you, or chefs or whatever. And so you're kind of following the wrong people to begin with. But then the sort of story that you're giving yourself there is there's a number of triggers in everything that you just said. The first one being that you said it was really hard, but it shouldn't be. I think most people take on diets and things like that and exercise regimes and everything else as if it's a punishment. as if it's something that it has to feel bad. You have to feel like a martyr for having done it, and you can tell everybody how hard it is and how you're starving yourself and how you're hungry all the time and all that. And it's not deliberate. Nobody goes out there deliberately trying to do that. It just becomes a thing that people tend to focus on, is the idea that, oh, this is tough, therefore it must work. And if it's not tough, it's not going to work. And
Well, I agree and don't agree with you in that respect, because I was, after many, many years as a woman, I've always been on some sort of diet. A couple of years ago, I felt like really my weight is getting out of control. I never managed to shake my pregnancy weight after 2 children. And I thought I needed to implement long-lasting habits. So I shopped around and found an online program that really explained the psychological reasons behind our habits and really educated me in a way. But the program still was deprive yourself. So, go for 1,500 calories a day as a woman, and try to fill your plate. Try to fill those calories with fruit and veg first, and veg first and foremost. There were bits and pieces about having a treat, and really they weren't encouraging you eating like a rabbit the whole time or things like that. And even though it was gentle for me and it explained a lot of the mechanisms behind it, going from, I don't know exactly how many calories I was having, but let's say I had 2,000 easily, if not more, every day, to 1,500. It's tough. And also, every single choice you make about what you put in your mouth, going through the filter of, is this green? Is this good? Is this healthy? That is tough as well. It just consumes so much of your mind and your energy every single day when you're trying to implement those changes. So it was hard from that point of view.
That's kind of what I mean, is that there's it's almost like the brain runs on calories as well. You get a certain amount of mental calories that you can deal with in the day, and usually in the morning people are a bit more savvy and have a bit more to give. But if you burn up all your mental calories in the morning, then by the time you get to the afternoon, then everything becomes a chore, and it does become something that becomes much more difficult to deal with. But that goes back to the thing of, if you're making life really difficult for yourself at the beginning by making everything hard, because you're counting, you basically went from not doing anything to counting calories, checking the nutritional content and the macronutrients and all those kind of things of the food that you're taking. Plus you're sitting trying to work out how you're going to cook these things and get these things in. I'm going to guess, compared to what would have been easier before, is to just grab a snack of some kind.
Open the door. That complicated the whole dynamics of the family, because once I decided I can't afford to eat pizza every 2 days, which is what my kids love to do, that meant the dinner was a 3-course dish, because I had to create something for myself, something for them. If they have set different preferences with regards to their pizza toppings, so I would bake pizzas and look at them like, that's fine, I'll just have my salad here and I'll be fine. It's that kind of thing is.
But the thing is that essentially those there are certain parts of your life that you just do, and you do it without thinking about it. You get up in the morning and probably brush your teeth, have a shower, whatever, all these kind of things, and you don't really think about it. You just do it. You go through the motions of what you do every day. And there are certain parts of the day where you sort of trigger into a sequence of things that you don't necessarily have to think about. So that would be like, if you're going to the shops these days, you make sure you've got your bags, because you need your bag for life or whatever, and you can't turn up without them. And now you have to take a mask as well, and all these things start to become habitual, and you don't have to think about them. You don't have to burn a lot of mental calories when you're doing it. But then what the problem with the New Year resolution particularly is that it's almost triggered by the fact that you've got that day that, okay, everything must start now, and you either succeed or you fail. And as soon as you fail, it's kind of over. For a lot of people anyway, it's that thing, oh, I failed now, rather than I had a blip on the way. And now that they've failed, they just give up and go back to the way things were. And I'll try again next week or something, and then it becomes Monday. It's always, I'll start on Monday for some reason. But the thing being then that you're sort of triggering into this new year, but then you try and do everything at once. So you're basically, what you're trying to do is create a new life, or a new set of habits, but a whole lifestyle worth of habits immediately.
Yeah.
Because if it was the easier thing would be to just say that, well, okay, I'm going to change one thing. I'm going to try and get one thing to fit. And that thing might just be, drink more water, get to bed earlier. It could be make sure that you eat at the same time every single day, and that there's a vegetable in every meal, something like that. I mean, just one little thing. And if you can do that one thing and make it habitual, then when you add the next thing on, you don't have to think about the first thing anymore, because you just do that. It's just part of your life. The problem with it is, when you get to New Year's, people want to then have made the difference by February. Or, they want to undo 5 years worth of undoing or bad habits, and then fix it all within a month. And that's just not going to happen, for one thing. But the issue with it is that at that time of year as well, knowing that there's going to be New Year's resolutions and things, the media that's out there, and by that I mean magazines, entertainment magazines and things like that, and all the adverts on TV and everything, are talking about how you can lose 2 stone in 2 weeks or something like that. And it's crazy figures, but they'll usually pick the most extreme, the most sensationalized thing, because it's a headline grabbing thing. You're not going to sell a magazine if you say, this celebrity has lost 3 pounds in 3 weeks. It doesn't, nobody's grabbing to that. Oh, how did they do that? I really want to check that out. Whereas that would be a much more measured approach. Things like, I don't know if it's still on actually, because I haven't checked for a while, but The Biggest Loser was huge for a while, particularly the American one. And the amount of weight that people were losing week on week, and that was staggering. You're talking about 20 pounds in a week or something. And
what I've read, though, most people who've been on such extreme programs don't manage to actually keep the weight off.
No,
is that
they
your
don't.
experience as well?
Yeah, well, the thing with it is that becomes a thing about, again, it's sensationalism for the TV. Now, the problem with The Biggest Loser, I mean, this is a whole tangent in itself, but the problem with The Biggest Loser, in my view, was on the good side, it was encouraging people to do something. You were seeing people who were in very extreme levels of obesity, and they were still making a difference. And that might have encouraged someone to get off the couch and go and do something. And that's the positive tick on one side. But the other side of the equation, the things that they were measuring, first of all, they were measuring weight, not fat. Now, they're giving away millions of dollars in prize money. I'm sure they could have afforded some kind of machine, whether it be a DAXA scanner or some kind of like big multi-million pound machine that would have actually done a body fat scan, or at least done some underwater weighing or something like that, like they do in universities. They could have done something to measure body fat percentage rather than weight, but they would never have got the sensationalized figures, because nobody's losing 20 pounds of fat in a week. They might lose 3 or 4 pounds of fat, given the level they're starting with, and 10 or 15 pounds worth of water weight in week one. But once you've done that, because you could see them all, they're all dehydrating as well leading up to the weigh-in. And then once you've done that once, well, you can't exceed that the next week. So how do you keep the chain going, or how do you keep the thing going forward? And you can't do it in a way that is healthy. It's just impossible. So it's out there. There are stories of the very first person to ever win. The name escapes me. It wasn't something I followed hugely, but I did read some of these stories. The first winner of The Biggest Loser in America is quoted as saying, number one, I think it was he put half the weight back on within about 6 months or something of leaving the show. The second thing was that by the end of it, he has said that the money became the thing. When he first went into it, it was about losing weight. But then as he got nearer and nearer to the finish line, it became about winning the money, because this would be enough money to set his family up for life. So I believe at the last hurdle, what they do is they break it down so that you've got 3 weeks on your own. You have to go home, which is another failing of the show really up until that point, because you're trying to build habits in people that they can take for life, ideally. But what they're doing is being put in a very fake environment. They're being put into a sort of a farm almost, and they're taken away from real life. So they don't have the stresses of trying to prepare dinner for a family. They don't have the stresses of work. They don't have the stresses of sudden bills coming in or something breaking in their house. They just live their lives and they focus exclusively on losing weight. Now they're put back into the real world. And the idea behind that, the logic behind that seems sound, in that, well, now can you show us that you can still do it in the real world? And if you can, then you're going to win the show. But the reality is this person went away and basically for those 3 weeks lived on, I think it was water with vinegar and something else in it. But basically, we're just trying to flush themselves out. And at the end of it, he was saying that he was urinating blood. It was that bad.
Okay.
But he didn't care, because it was like, if he eats something, he might not win the money. And that's really what it came down to. Okay. So obviously that's
not the way to go. We're not going for that. We're going for small incremental changes.
Yeah.
That can improve, our energy and can add up over time.
Yeah, but the problem with that is at New Year's, then you've got that bombarded. So you're hearing 20 pounds lost, 15 pounds lost, 20 pounds lost. Mm-hmm. And then you're doing your thing and maybe you lose 2 pounds in a week. And it sounds terrible. It feels like it's a bad thing. And that's not inspiring you to move forward. Yeah. And I think the problem with that is when you focus on weight. When you focus exclusively on weight, then it's just a number on a scale. Nobody sees that. You're not. You should be before. Ideally, the goal is to try and focus on something that is more about how you feel, because that's what got you where you are when you wanted to start. You feel bad. Yeah. How are you going to change that? How can you make it so that you feel better on a day-to-day basis? And that's
you're saying that we shouldn't focus on stones or pounds or kilos. And we should just focus on our overall feeling of, okay, I wake up in the morning, I'm not exhausted, I'm looking forward to the day, I'm comfortable in moving, my tummy's happy, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, essentially you've made a step forward, but steps don't have to be weight. The step forward could be one of the early things that I usually always work with clients is the idea of mobility and posture and balance. How do you move? Can you physically move properly? And if you can't, then can you do something to fix it? Because if your knee hurts every time you walk up and down the stairs, then that's going to limit the amount of activity you can do. So therefore your calorie output is going to be down. And I think that's the other problem, is that you mentioned 1,500 calories in the diet that you did, which I don't know if that was set for you or it was 1,500 calories for the diet. That was kind of the standard for women in this diet.
Yeah, it was more of a question of, okay, what pace are you setting for yourself to lose weight? And I said, I don't want something extreme, because for extreme cases, they would have gone down to 1,200 calories. And I thought, this is absolutely not achievable for me. It's just scary to think of. So I kind of chose a mild, but that, now that you mention it, I am not a woman of average height. I am quite tall. So I guess my frame I don't really know.
Well, I've measured usually in the before times. I would measure all my clients, as in do body composition analysis.
Mhm.
Even if I was doing it remotely, usually what I would do is send them a set of AccuMeasure self-testing calipers, and then try and train them how to use it. It's not as ideal, but it does the job. It lets you track. And in 15 years of doing this, I don't think I've ever come across anyone who has, in order to be able to burn fat, or the optimal to burn fat has ever been as low, anywhere near 1,200 calories,
Mhm.
ever.
So that's really extreme.
1,500 is actually quite low. I would say that for most people, most women that I've trained, it's been anywhere between maybe 1,600 calories and in some cases even as high as about 2,000.
Mhm.
Part of it depends on what your current body composition is, how much muscle you've got already, and how much of that is being used on a day-to-day basis to then consume energy. There's a much more complex way of looking at this, but the actual science behind it is incredibly complicated. But ultimately, calories out is very, very closely related to oxygen consumption. The more oxygen you're consuming, the more calories you're burning at any given time. So when you get out of breath, you tend to be burning more calories. So somebody that's just sitting around all day, sitting at a desk working on a computer and isn't doing very much, is not going to have the same output as someone who's doing manual labor all day.
Yeah.
So that's just on a day-to-day basis. But then you're factoring in, well, do you play a sport? Do you go to the gym? What are you doing to be active? And if you're just sort of taking a baseline of saying that, well, all females should be taking 1,500 calories a day, well, that can't possibly be right.
Mhm.
If somebody is sitting at a desk all day, they need fewer calories than someone who's moving about all day, who needs fewer calories than someone who's playing a sport 3 or 4 times a week, and they need fewer calories than someone who is doing it for a living. I think it's famously Michael Phelps. I think he was something like, what was it? 13,000 calories or
I know,
something
I
crazy like
read
that.
an
It,
interview.
it was a huge number,
Yeah, he was
even
eating
more
as
than
a burger.
bodybuilders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bodybuilders quite often end up in the sort of like 6,000 or 7,000 calorie region for intake.
That's not
But
my case.
if you're being
Let's just
active
assume
the whole
that
time,
that's not the case of the people who are listening, who might be
no.
listening to this.
Mhm.
It's usually, and especially now, um, this is actually something that my husband noticed as well, because he used to go out to work.
Mhm.
And he figured out ever since he's been working from home, temptation is just so close.
Yeah.
So let's assume that our audience is kind of like us, cooped up in the
Yeah.
house. The fridge is always available, always
Mhm.
filled with all sorts. The cupboard is brimming because
Mhm.
there are kids in the house, and you can't really say no more Oreos in the house,
Mhm.
guys, because you don't want to be accused of um, bad stuff and trauma.
Yeah.
So let's think about people like me. Like, what would you advise them to
Well,
do?
essentially, the other thing, the other part that you'd kind of said before was about the idea that you weren't allowed to have X, Y, and Z. You know, you weren't allowed to have pizza and those kind of things when you're doing
No,
the diet.
well, it was more of a choice. If I had
Yeah.
1,500 calories every day, would I want a slice of pizza, or
Mhm.
would I rather have, a massive bowl of vegetables that
Mhm.
would fill me up, rather than a slice of pizza and then go hungry for the rest of the day, if that makes
Yeah.
sense? So
Yeah.
it was more of my own choice of how
Well,
do I want to fill this?
that's a good position to be in. That's not the common position. Most people would rather have the slice of pizza. Um, I I have known people who've done the sort of points-based systems where you're allowed a certain number of points in a week, and basically that is still calorie counting, just by another name, really.
Mhm.
And I've seen people save them up, where they'll actually starve themselves all week so they can drink at the weekend and that kind of thing.
Does it work?
Which
Do cheat
no,
days work?
cheat days, yes, to some degree. I'm not a big fan of the term because it almost seems like what you're cheating on is you're living your life, really. So a refeed day might be a better way of putting it. And yes, they do work when you're hormonally at a level where it's going to make a difference. But to be at that level, you have to be in a position where you've gone at a baseline of sort of, again, I really don't like the term clean, but it's something that people understand, clean eating, where everything is healthy and the calories are down and stuff for a while. Then yes, but 3 days in, having a cheat day is not,
Right.
it's not going to make the difference. Even a weekend is not going to make a difference. Sort of saying that you're going to do this every week. There's a coach, I think he's in Canada, maybe America or Canada. Scott Abel is his name. He's got a diet called the Cycle Diet, and he was a bodybuilder for years, and he sort of invented this of his own accord, and then the science sort of caught up with it, where he would the weekend he would maybe have a box of Krispy Kreme donuts, that kind of thing. But you can't do that in week one. You can get to that point where you've been incredibly healthy for about 6 months or something, and your hormones are a level where they can cope with it. But I think that's the problem. When you start putting rules in, when you start putting rules into a diet, when it's an actual diet, a diet is something that people go on. I'm on a diet, which also means it's something that you intend to come off at some point then, rather than it being a change to your lifestyle. So I'd rather be encouraging a change of habits than going on a diet to then come off a diet, because you're going to come off it. Similarly, if you've got Oreos in the house, they're going to be eaten.
Yes.
These are things that are just going to happen. Someone's going to eat them.
I've learned it's unavoidable.
Yeah. So the only option in that instance is if you're saying that, well, for children, you don't want to be seen to be depriving them and not giving them anything, then making it something that, well, this is yours. There you go. And this is yours. And they've maybe got a little box or something. You wouldn't go and raid your kid's piggy bank. Or take something away that was theirs of a possession and just take it for yourself. So if you get something that is specifically theirs, then are you really going to go and eat it?
Yes.
You are. Well, okay.
So it highly depends. As you said, I would be very good in the morning, probably restrained at lunch, but come 2 p.m. and my kind of midday sugar slump, all bets are off.
Yeah. Well, with that, I mean, you sort of almost have to get into the details of each individual circumstance in that case. But it's really about coming up with one solution that will change one thing that's going to make the biggest difference. Really, that's what it all comes down to. And it's doing one thing at a time. So if that is the big thing, if the one thing is eating biscuits in the middle of the afternoon.
Yes, or generally sugar cravings. I think a sweet tooth is a phenomenon that I hope I'm not the only one suffering from it. I know I'm not.
No, you're not. Well, I suffer from it.
So how do you cope with it?
Well, the thing is that there's, first of all, the thing is to get to know yourself. So there's two types of people in this regard to me. There's a type of person who it's all or nothing. You're either someone who, when you start eating, you're going to keep eating and you're not going to be able to stop. So if there's a box of biscuits in front of you, you can't have one. You're going to keep eating into that box. That's me. I'm that kind of person. The other type of person is someone who, if you deprive that person, they're going to want it more. They're going to desire even more than they did before, and it's going to really throw them off their game. Whereas if that person was allowed one biscuit, and I say allowed, we're talking about adults here, and saying allowed is a terrible way of saying it. You're an adult, you can eat what you want, but if you're making the choice that you want to make a difference, and you're choosing to eliminate sugar or restrict sugar massively, but you knew that you could have one biscuit a day and that would be okay as long as you limit it to that. If you're the kind of person that works for, then that's the kind of thing to do then. And also try and find the least sugary option, I suppose. Then you're just trying to look in the back of packets and figure out which one's going to have the least effect on your health and your calorie intake. But
also give you the most amount of joy.
Yes. Yeah, it's finding the balance. Everything's about finding a balance. And if you don't find that balance, well, I suppose the thing to say first of all is if you lie to yourself, it's not going to work. So that's usually where someone like me comes into this, because it's having that sounding board to be able to like go back and forth with week upon week. Because it's very easy to convince yourself, yes, if I could just have the one, I'd be okay. And then you look back after 3 days and 2 packets of biscuits have gone missing. And then you remember, oh yeah, I did, didn't I? Because one became just one more, just today, because I need the boost, I need the energy or something like that. You convince yourself. You'll always convince yourself.
Absolutely. I've probably sugar is my biggest addiction, and it's proving to be very hard to shake off. Now I'm a real food fan. I love cooking, I love baking, I watch recipes just for the pleasure of being inspired. I'm really into my food. And one of the issues that I see myself confronting on a daily basis is the fact that I need to finish my meals on a sweet note. And if I don't, I find that something's missing. And it's obviously become a habit.
Yes.
I do try to cheat myself with fruit. I bought those no sugar drops that can just give you, like the feeling that you're having something sweet, but it's really tiny and it has no sugar. So potentially it's better. I don't manage to cheat myself every single time. Have you confronted this? Have you seen this?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that when you get to that, essentially what you have done is you created a habit, and it's a linking habit. You've linked one habit to another habit. So the habit of eating sugary things is then linked to eating a meal first. So habitually at the end of a meal, you have a pudding or dessert or whatever.
And it's also because I don't find it so hard to have a healthy meal, and then I think I deserve a treat because I had a very healthy meal.
So you've convinced yourself now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a few things with that. Number one is if your meal was actually full of all the nutrients that you needed, then there wouldn't actually be the physical craving for it the same way. I think quite often, again, in convincing yourself, quite a lot of people in that situation, what they'll do is they'll eat less for their main meal, knowing that they want the treat at the end of it.
Yes.
So they're not going to fill themselves up. I can look at my child does that, where, it's that thing of they're not finishing their dinner because they need to leave a little space for the sweet thing that comes at the end of it.
Okay, so I'm a primary school child basically in this behavior.
But it's just something that we're all just growing up children anyway. It's just that we put a social facade on it, but it's all still there, and you will convince yourself, subconsciously you'll convince yourself. But if that meal was so densely loaded with nutrients that your body felt completely satisfied, then you still wouldn't have the physical craving for the sugar.
Right.
But that doesn't mean to say you wouldn't still go and want to have it. And sugary things are very easy to consume. They burn up very quickly and they can get into your system. So that's why you can overeat on them. So now it's just a habit thing. It's a little bit like giving up smoking or something like that. After about 3 days of giving up smoking, the nicotine is out your system. The physical craving is gone, but the habit of the feeling like when you need to relax, you light up a cigarette, or when you need to relax, or some people let's open a bottle of wine or something like that. Internally you feel stressed or you feel wound up about something, and your go-to is this thing that you don't have to do anything for, because it's going to give you this little endorphin release that's going to make you feel a bit trippy and just chill. It's just going to make you breathe a little bit better. So again, it's trying to find out something that you can't just eliminate it. That's the one thing. When you've got a linked habit like that, you can't take the habit and unlink the other piece and just leave a hole there. You have to put something else in its place. Otherwise, all you're doing now is trying to use willpower, which will probably last about 30 seconds or something before you find a reason why today you have to have the thing, and tomorrow you'll do without it. So putting something else in its place, but the something is going to be different for everyone. Now, one of the easiest things to do is to do some kind of breathing exercise at the end of your meal, or whenever it is that it's going to come up, because ultimately what it's doing when you have that sugar intake, is to relax you, and then you breathe more deeply. So sometimes just taking a minute or 2 minutes to do some kind of breathing exercise is just going to let you breathe more deeply. You might have been breathing more shallowly than you realize when you feel a bit uptight. I mean, for anybody that's ever just sort of in the middle of the day just went, and people around are like, oh, what's the matter? Nothing. But actually, it was just because you were thinking about something, or something was stressing you out, or you've just been a bit tense, and you just needed to get more oxygen in, and that's all it is. And taking the time just to do that could make all the difference. Maybe, maybe not. It won't probably happen on day one, where it makes all the difference. But if you can find something that you can stick with for a little while and keep it in for a little while, then it's more likely to stick. And if it doesn't stick, you have to reevaluate. So normally what the process I would go through with someone is to try and say that we're going to set a time limit on it. So in this instance, it might be a case of saying, okay, what could we come up with? And we spitball ideas, really. So I might mention the breathing thing, and you might tell me why that's not going to work for you, because as soon as dinner's finished, you've got dishes to do, or the kids are running riot or something.
But other things spring to my mind. For instance, I heard about the idea of brushing your teeth immediately after a meal, because that kind of cuts the...
It does, yeah.
the pleasure of the taste of sugar.
Yeah, it's not something I'm gonna claim to be an expert on here, but there is supposedly also a thing though about brushing your teeth straight afterwards is not so good for your teeth.
Right.
Like immediately after. But the reasons for that is not something I'm an expert on, so I'm not going to go into a whole load of detail on it, but it might be something to consider. But yes, I mean, it's why some people chew gum and things like that as well. But the thing there being that you're not going to be able to brush it. If you were at a restaurant or something and you get to the end of the meal, you're not going to whip your toothbrush out your bag and start brushing your teeth. So you almost need something that you can put into almost every situation.
Right.
And again, it's one of these things that it might just be a case of you want something to continue to snack on while you're talking to people. And I've done it in the past with carrot sticks. And I know people do that sometimes when, again, going back to the smoking thing, because it's something you put up to your mouth, like a cigarette. So putting something like that in there, maybe. Or it could just be that after your meal, you do something. And you give yourself 10 minutes, because you would have had that 10 minutes to eat anyway. You give yourself 10 minutes to do something relaxing and enjoyable. Very recently, I've been talking to a client about the idea of sticking in, those coloring in books that you get, the adult coloring in books, where you, she seemed to at one point get into the idea where it was actually keeping her awake at night, because she was sitting doing it till 1 o'clock in the morning. But then it wasn't about sugary things. It was about alcohol consumption. It was about particularly wine. And it was about replacing the habit of that. And it was something to just mark the end of the day, the end of the working day, and say, it's time to relax now. What am I going to do that basically delineates that my work day has ended and my relaxing time has started? And so the idea was to put that book next to the desk where she was working, so that she could immediately say, at the end of the day now, I'm going to color in this for 10 minutes. That might not be something that you particularly have a joy with, but it's more trying to then work through what do you do to relax that's healthy? What things have you done in the past?
Almost like having a palette of things For instance, I've been looking into the tapping technique. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
Again, it's not something to do in the middle of a restaurant.
No.
Oh, when we're going to be in the middle of a restaurant again.
Yes.
But it's really gentle, and there is a pattern to it, and it just gives me a couple of minutes to calm down, and it relaxes my face, and I find that really important, especially when I scrunch to watch a screen all day or things like that. Just breathing. Some people, I enjoy listening to audiobooks, or when you get into something active like a short walk or something, or a dance around the kitchen. I don't know. As long as you have a range of small activities, it's just something that I've noticed about myself is when I find myself without a plan, that's when I make the worst choice.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that goes back to the one of the books that I recommend to most people is the Chimp Paradox, which talks about how your brain functions and how essentially there are parts of your brain, the limbic system in your brain is always going to act quicker in the moment. It's like one of the ones it uses in the book that's quite good is talking about road rage. If somebody cuts you up, you immediately get angry, and now you're sort of in it. You don't have time to think about what is this going to do, like in what way is this going to help me. Me getting angry in my car, what difference is that going to make? But then it boils over, and you sort of carry it through to the end of your journey. And then the first person you meet, I can't believe this person I saw on the road, all that kind of thing. Whereas if you start your journey, and you did start by saying, if somebody cuts me up, this is what I'm going to do. And it does not, and you've pre-thought about it, you're much more likely then when it comes around, because you've now pre-thought about it, you don't have time to react. Yeah. Because the reaction was done earlier, it was pre-planned. So in this instance, it would probably be a case of saying that the dancing around the kitchen thing, well, you're probably not going to do that all the time, and you're certainly not going to do it in a restaurant. So, so maybe you need something for each venue. Yeah. But you've got your home venue, and this is what I'm going to do at home, and this is my standard. But when I go out for a meal, this is what I'm going to do. If I go to someone's house, whenever that's allowed again, this is what I'm going to do, and so on. So you start to think about all the scenarios, but well in advance. And then you can get to the part where you say, but it's, I mean, there was a point in my life where I took it quite obsessively. So then you're at, somebody's birthday party, or you're at a wedding or something like that, and you're refusing to eat half the stuff that's there. That's pretty obsessive. So then it's just a case of trying to say, well, okay, but I've got this thing in my calendar, and this is going to happen in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time or something. When I get to that, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to enjoy myself. But because of that, on the way up to it, I can't give myself any excuses, because I know that's coming. And there's going to be many of those through the year. So it's just trying to find your one thing that you can do. And it's focusing in that one thing and that one thing only, not trying to do that whilst also trying to count calories, trying to get a morning run in, trying to get a yoga session in, trying to make sure you're drinking more water and getting to sleep at night, making sure, all these things that people just throw at it and trying to do everything at once. You pick one that that you're going to be able to do. And you follow through on it until it becomes a habit. And the other thing with it being, what is the one thing that is going to make the biggest long-term change for you? And that's where, I've spoken about this before, but you sort of talk about going back to architecture days, where you're building a thing, you've got a process of building. You don't start, the bit everybody wants in a building is the finishes, the bits that look pretty. The cladding and the kind of nice windows and the finishes in the inside, what color is everything going to be, and the nice door finishes and all those kind of things. That's what everybody sees in a building, or once they're in it, the decor that they're putting into it. And nobody cares about what the foundations look like. But if you don't build good foundations, all that stuff is irrelevant because it's all going to come crumbling down again afterwards. So it's building your foundations one bit at a time. And it might be boring stuff, and it might be stuff that you don't feel is going to make a huge difference. And I always come back to the same ones over and over again. Water intake for most people is insufficient, especially if you then try to be active, because there's more going out. So, you know, the idea of even 2 liters of water a day, I've seen a lot of people who try and exercise 4 or 5 times a week, and 2 liters of water a day to them feels like they're doing incredibly well. But actually, for most people, that's not enough if you're exercising. Sleep.
Yeah, you know, I've been first a good example of that, because we had this conversation last summer, and I changed my habits around water, and that really improved the quality of my life. So I'm a big advocate of that, and I credit you for really encouraging me to be more mindful about the amount of water that I consumed, when I consumed it. And now, you know, it's quite regular that I would bring a glass of water wherever I am and say, I didn't drink enough water today, which is something that I never used to do, but it definitely changed my skin, other health issues that I had. It made me less hungry. So you can reach for a cup of water when you feel like you need a snack. And I realize now, actually, I'm not hungry, I'm thirsty.
Yes.
But I've been confusing the feeling.
Yeah. Well, your brain doesn't know how to trigger that. Your body triggers a lack of something, and your brain then interprets that however it wants. So that's where it comes back to, like, if you're short in certain vitamins or minerals or you know, any kind of like part of your body that you need, your brain just triggers that as hungry. And usually what ends up happening with that, and this goes back to the chocolate thing, is you eat chocolate and you immediately feel better.
Yes.
And then suddenly say you were short of zinc or magnesium or something like that. Magnesium's a common one for chocolate, but if you're short of something, any kind of nutrient, and your body sends a signal to your brain says, okay, I'm hungry. Well, okay, there's a bar of chocolate, I'll have that. And you feel brilliant, and the hunger goes away in the short term because you relax. But then 20 minutes later, your body goes, hang on a minute, we asked for vitamin D or magnesium or zinc or something like that. It sends a trigger back to the brain again and says, no, we still need, we're still short of the thing, whatever it was. And your brain then says, well, chocolate worked quite well last time, so let's have some more of that. And you have another bit of chocolate, and then that cycle just continues until you actually break the pattern.
So what's your recommendation around the number of meals that someone who is trying to, you know, move to a healthier lifestyle?
Yeah, that's I would say that there's science on this, and the science tells you it doesn't matter. In a lab, it doesn't matter whether it's 1 meal, 3 meals, 6 meals, 10 meals. It makes no difference whatsoever. There used to be the argument from bodybuilders that you had to keep your metabolism burning. So you would eat maybe 5 or 6 small meals a day, and that would keep you going. Now, for a lot of people, that works. And the reason that works is because it stops you snacking. The gap between meals is so small, you don't have time to snack. You just finish one meal and you're thinking about, well, have I got to eat again? And I have done that. I've had it where I went through a process of having 6 meals a day. And quite often you would get to the end of the third one, say, and you're thinking, do I need to eat again already? You know, and you definitely don't have time to snack when you're doing that. But the other thing is you don't have time to do anything else. And the problem with that is that you have a life to live. So really what you're trying to do is figure out what can you do every day, because what your body likes is habit. So if you have a 5-day week, a 5-day working week where you can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it works out perfectly well, and then at the weekend you get up, you have a little bit of a lie-in, you get up, and then again, we're going back to normal times here, you go to the shops and you kind of got on with your day, and before you know it, it's sort of 3 PM and you haven't eaten anything yet.
You have brunch with your friends.
Yes. So now you've skewed the pattern
Yes.
out, and you end up maybe you only have 2 meals at the weekend. Or alternatively, it might be that at the weekend you just are eating all the time because you have the whole day to yourself. So you have 6 or 7 meals at the weekend. What you're trying to work out is which one fits into the other one, and try and make that the standard. Which can you make your weekday fit the weekend, or can you make your weekend fit the weekday? You're
But
probably more likely to
key throughout the week. Is that?
yeah, and make it the same. So it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5. It doesn't matter. It just, what can you do? But there's no point in saying you're going to eat 6 meals a day and then you're going to have a 3-hour meeting in the middle of the day where you can't have your second meal or your third meal or something like that, and then you miss it because what you meant to do in that situation, then you're on to your next meal already. You don't have time to catch up, if you like, and your body will notice. So your body likes habit. So essentially what will end up happening is if you eat at 12 o'clock every single day and it gets to 1 o'clock and you haven't eaten yet, you start to feel a bit antsy and a bit desperate for food. And suddenly that's where the chocolate bars and everything come into it, because it's quick and you can just satisfy yourself quickly. Whereas if you never ate at 12 o'clock during the day and you only ever ate at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that, then you won't get that feeling until that point. For a few days when you make the switch, it'll feel awkward and you just have to be expecting it. And that's again that sort of pre-planning for it and just being ready for the fact that you know you're going to feel a bit off for a few days while your body resets to the new timetable. Once it does reset to the new timetable, that'll be fine as long as you stick to it. So that's why it has to be something you stick to. So quite often the question usually becomes, what is the best? And it could be, what is the best diet? What is the best exercise routine? What is the best eating pattern? What is the best? And there isn't one. There is what is the best for you.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. How do you feel about intermittent fasting? And I'm asking especially about the idea of not eating for 14 to 16 hours out of the 24-hour cycle.
Yeah. Well, essentially, all that is going back to what I just said. Intermittent fasting works for a couple of reasons. One of them is because it, by default, should decrease the number of calories you consume. So you've got less time to eat. So you're going to feel full at a certain point, and so you don't have time to fit more in. But it also goes back to that thing then of some people like treating it as a chore. You know, that kind of, oh, woe is me, I've not eaten for 16 hours, I'm doing this, look how hardcore I am. But then that'll become something that they do and then they stop doing. You know, it's whether can you do that every day forever going forward. If you can, it's fine. But the other thing is it can be used as a license to do what you want at that point.
A small window of opportunity.
Yeah, I've got my small window of opportunity. I'm allowed to eat what I want in here, and I'm going to stuff my face with cake and biscuits and stuff like that. It's not supposed to work that way. Intermittent fasting has, you know, it depends on which one you read. I mean, there's lots of these, and
experience with fasting. Well, first of all, was like you said, it just doesn't fit with our family routine. We all sit down and have breakfast, and especially now that we're cooped up in the house, we sit down and have breakfast together. And I felt like I was depriving myself of that time with the family, or I was sitting there resenting everybody while I was having a black coffee. You know, not ideal. But
so that's why I did.
Once I got into the rhythm of it, I've followed this for a few weeks. The first meal I had around 12 o'clock had to be really small because otherwise I was feeling sick. So my stomach all of a sudden shrinked. And so even if I felt like I could indulge, I really couldn't because I was feeling full very quickly. It was really an adjustment. And of course it tapered off because, you know, my husband's making omelets and there's bacon, and every morning breakfast is like a thing. So it's really tough to say no to all that and have a sad, you know, tea and toast at 12 by myself.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like ultimately, a lot of these things for me come back to, why are you doing this? Why would anybody want to torture themselves in an attempt to make a number on a scale or something change? Ultimately, the
Well,
reason
you
people are
know,
supposed to.
I mean, at least for me, there's always the underlying concern that I will end up having diabetes or
Yes.
other lifestyle related health issues. And I think for most of us, that's the concern. And that's why we're trying, okay, let's go, let's do this,
Yeah.
get results. Okay, this is gonna work.
Yeah. But ultimately what that comes back to is everything you're describing there is about quality of life. So you're trying to improve your quality of life
by diminishing my quality of life.
Exactly. So it's trying to find the balance between those two things. At what point, you don't have to be ripped, you don't have to have a six-pack, you don't have to look amazing, like to a level that could be on the cover of a magazine or on TV or something like that. You don't have to be at that level. You have to be at a level that you feel comfortable and you feel happy, and that's going to lift your life in general. And the process to get you there has to also be part of that. It has to fit in with that part of your life. And that's it's finding that balance between those two things. So what you're ideally trying to do is look at your life the way you want it to be. And sort of planning ahead. If your life was exactly as you wanted it to be, you would be healthy and vibrant and have all this energy. And if you did have all of that, what would your life look like? Why would it be better? And if you envisage that and you envisage what your life looks like, and you try to be that person, you're not trying to be some kind of martyr that's going to get you to a point where you can then switch onto this other person. You're trying to be that person now internally and start to act like that person. So what are the bits that are missing? And you start plugging the gaps one little bit at a time, one little habit at a time, excited by the picture of the thing that is going to become your life. And that's really what it comes down to. That's where the enthusiasm comes. That's what's going to override anything else. You're never going to win with willpower alone. You have to be able to see a picture of your life that is so inspiring, so exciting, that you're driven every day by the excitement of the fact that you know you're going to get there. It's a little bit like going on a holiday or something like that. You jump on an airplane. Nobody gets excited. Well, when you're a kid, I suppose you do a little bit, but nobody really gets excited about the plane journey. Nobody gets excited about going to the airport and sort of standing around for 2 hours and taking your shoes off and the belt off and all this sort of stuff and through air traffic control.
Right now, I feel excited about that too.
Well, yeah. But you're excited because you know where it's leading to.
Yeah.
So none of that stuff, if that was the holiday, was going to the airport and hanging around in the airport for 2 weeks, I don't think anybody would be too keen on that. It's because you know what the destination is that piece can become exciting. It can be exciting about the fact that, oh, we're going, and usually the trip back, it's the same trip. You go to the airport, you're still on a plane. People are less excited about it at that point. They're a bit more miserable, but it's the same thing. But it's two perceptions of where you're going, and it's having that in your head, that picture of what is coming, that would keep you excited. And a lot of people, when they book holidays, you're booking it a year in advance, and then you get more and more excited as it comes, because you know that every day that passes, you're one step closer. Having this vision of what your life is going to be, if you can then say that I've made a change that has moved me one step closer to it, and you do that every single day, you can be excited by it. You don't need to lose 2 stone or whatever. Yeah.
And would you say there is an ideal balance on your plate for people who are trying to change their life? Obviously, less sugar, I suppose, is great. Is there the right balance, or again?
No, it depends on. It's almost like saying what's the right fuel to put in your car, I suppose. It depends what you're going to do with it, and depends on what type of engine it has in it already. So,
can you figure that out through a conversation with your clients, or how do you?
Yeah, it becomes a slow thing, and it's also a feedback loop as well, because if it depends on how nuanced you're trying to go. First of all, you can review what somebody is currently eating, And again, instead of just saying that, okay, we're going to take that away from you and we're going to give you this instead, and like you've gone from pizza every night to chicken and broccoli every night, I don't think that's going to stick. Whereas at least if the pizza became something where, first of all, it included some vegetables or something like that, then at least that's a start. And it's an improvement. It's a slight improvement. And it gets somebody who probably would say, if you said, can you eat these vegetables, would say, oh, I don't like vegetables. But if they're kind of mixed into a pizza, maybe they'll include them. I don't know, but it goes for every individual person to be different.
Yeah. For me, the balance is that, okay, if I'm going to have something unhealthy, like lots of carbs, I'm going to have a big salad with it, and I'm going to put the salad in front of me and the treats for a bit further away from me, so that I realized, I become more aware if I reach further for the pizza than if it's in front of me.
And that's useful. This
sort of thing.
That's definitely a useful tool.
It doesn't always work, but it's just one of these things that you can change, which is how the food is arranged. I notice usually it's the bowl of salad in the middle of the table, and I'm moving as much of the salad in my own bowl in front of me, because then it's a lot easier to and I make a point of putting the pizza away, so I have to really make the effort.
But then you're almost going back to the mental view of that food is bad and you're deprived from it and all that. You're setting a standard of some food is good, some food is bad, like that.
Well, it is. It's also
rather than just being in control of you.
40 hot cheese, it doesn't really agree with me anymore. So I know that I'm going to indulge and I'm going to suffer. So
well, I guess the part of it is to try and get to the point where you're so acutely aware of that you're in control now. At the moment, it's still with that what you're describing. You're essentially saying that the food is in control, and you have to put some handcuffs on yourself a little bit. But the goal is to try and get to a point where you're making a conscious decision, that you're consciously saying, no, I don't eat that food, because that person that's in your head and the lifestyle that you're living doesn't eat that food. And that's the person you are. So why would you eat that food? But as far as what goes on the plate and everything and what's on the table to begin with, a lot of that then comes down to what's your output going to be as well. Because I think quite a lot of times it becomes one or the other. You're looking at your diet and you're looking at your physical activity as two separate things. And they can't be. Again, going back to the petrol analogy or whatever, a Formula One car fuels differently than a road car, for example, because the Formula One car is doing a lot more work and it has to do it in a certain way where it's got performance going behind it. If you just diet alone, the stats back this up, people who just diet tend not to be particularly successful. But most people will then tell you that nutrition is the more important part. But without the exercise part of it, or the activity part of it, is maybe a better way of putting it, because it doesn't have to be going to the gym or doing specific exercises, but your output and the challenges you're putting on your body and your system is part of the equation. So things like the Atkins diet, for example, or I think the Dukan diet, I think, is the same, or any of these ones where you're eliminating carbs and you make carbs the enemy. All that's doing, again, is giving you a bad relationship with food, because now it's actually one of the easier diets to do, because essentially all you have to do is say that one thing's bad, let's not have that. And you might hate it, but the actual process is quite a sloppy and lazy approach. But the fact of it is, if you're active in any way, shape, or form, carbs are your go-to energy source. So you need carbs to be able to go and do exercise. And if you don't have enough...
Because I heard many times people who are into their sports, like into cycling or into trying to improve their sports performance, and they go, oh, I'm eating a low-carb diet to improve my performance. So that's very surprising that you're saying that.
It depends on which sport. because if you're doing an aerobic style sport, which is like, say, long distance running or a triathlon or something like that, your go-to source for energy is fat. So anything where you're at a steady pace for a long period of time, then your go-to source for fuel is fat. So having fat in your system is necessary. That's where you get the term skinny fat usually comes from. It's people who go on long distance runs and that's their only source of exercise. And therefore they're not, to look at, they are quite skinny. But if you were to measure their body fat percentage, they're a high ratio of fat to muscle, because your body doesn't need the muscle. Muscle's just a heavy thing. You know, if you're going for a run, you don't need much upper body muscle, because that's not what's propelling you forward. And your body just is very good at becoming more efficient at doing the thing that you're challenging it with. So it'll quite happily eat the muscle in your upper body, and it'll keep the muscles in your lower body that propel you forward, but maybe not so much the ones that move you laterally. And then as life goes on, you usually find that people who do that and exclusively do that end up with hip problems, knee problems, ankle problems, those kind of things, because all the muscles that keep them stable, that move them laterally, then become weak in comparison to the muscles that move them forward. So now they're out of balance physically.
Right.
But then if you move it back and you start saying, well, okay, in order to keep muscle so that I'm physically strong to be able to move in every direction and be healthy in general, and all your movements, and you're less prone to injury, you're doing some form of resistance style training. And if you're doing that, your go-to source for energy is carbs. So you need carbs to fuel that workout. Otherwise,
it sounds like it's all a very multi-layered. So obviously the level of activity, the quality of your activity, your own lifestyle and preferences come into it as well. Does age come into it?
Yes. It comes into it in so much as being realistic with yourself, I guess. When you're younger, your hormones are doing some strange things during your teen years usually, and your levels of testosterone in particular start to spike in men and women, and you get away with a lot more for the most part. Not everyone, but there are a lot of people who just get away with, you can eat anything. Plus, for the very early years in your life, your heart beats at a faster rate. So that goes back into the oxygen consumption thing again. So you're burning more calories just naturally. So you can stay skinny when you're a kid without too much hassle because you're running around a lot. If you sort of get into the habit, even as a kid, of sitting in front of a computer screen all the time and playing computer games and you don't move, then it's obviously going to go away. But the natural tendency for children is to run around and kind of move. And then as you're getting older, in the teen years, you probably want to be out of the house a lot because you want to be away from your parents. So you're just out doing stuff. And it just keeps you active again, even though you don't know it. And most teenagers and things play sports of some kind. It might not be the standard sport for their general, like football is the common one, but maybe somebody plays badminton or table tennis or something like that. You do something probably. And as a result of that, you still get away with stuff, but also you're kind of the new shiny, you buy something new out of the shops, it works very well for a long time. And over time, it just starts to degrade. And it's the same with your body. Your body just starts to degrade over time. The more you use it, the less that'll happen. And the more you keep yourself in shape, the fewer problems you're going to have, therefore the more active you're going to be. But as a natural tendency, your body does tend to store more fats as you get older. It may not be fat that you can see, but fat around the organs and things just to protect them, to try and protect your heart and your lungs and everything. The internal fat that you don't see on the outside is there. So your body fat percentage does rise over time. And then as a tendency, if you don't use your muscle, then that muscle is not pulling on the skeletal structure anymore. And as a result, your bones then, as they regenerate, because your entire body regenerates constantly, as it's regenerating, it just thinks, well, I don't need to be that strong. There's nothing pulling on me. So it does it in a more lazy way, and you get weaker and weaker bones. And that's where osteoporosis tends to come into the equation. And then you just can't do as much. And because you can't do as much, you burn less and so on. So yeah, as you get older, there's no denying that there's things that start to work against you. And having to accept that, I think, is one of the biggest problems that a lot of people have, because mentally, I think we're all still teenagers. You kind of look in the mirror and think, how what? When did that happen? Gray hairs? I'm not.
I was really taken aback a few years back when I went back to the gym after having my kids and them growing up to be independent. But that was quite a few years of body changes and being not static, because I had a lot of work to do caring for them, but not really working out, not going out dancing anymore every week, or, you know, just enjoying the active lifestyle that I used to have. I went back to the gym. I started with something gentle like yoga and Pilates. And I realized I couldn't reach my toes. And that's something that I always took for granted. The flexibility of my body was something that I thought I would carry with me forever and ever. And there I was, mid-30s, not being able to touch my toes with my fingers anymore. That was really a sobering moment when I realized I need to really work every week with my flexibility, with my strength, just to build back a little bit of what I used to be, at least.
Yeah, but at least you had that realization. I think what I found is, in fact, we found it during the first lockdown that we had to go through, is that a lot of people then at home did nothing. And my big concern, and it proved to be true, is when people came back after that first lockdown, there was an expectation that they could just do what they could do before, because that was working for them before. So I'm just going to do that again. And we did a lot of testing at that point, just to test range of movement and things, to try and showcase to people if there was a problem. And for most people, there was a problem. It was a huge problem for a lot of people. And if that person just goes straight back to doing what they tried to do before, the first thing that they're going to do is hurt themselves. And there is an issue here that people then, because of being away for a while, mentally, they feel that they've got to catch up. They've lost this time. They've got to catch up quickly. So mentally, nobody wants to go back to sort of the basics. But then because they want to catch up and they over-push themselves and overstretch themselves, they injure themselves. Now they're injured. They're not going to be able to do anything again for a while. So they're out of the game for maybe, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks, something like that. Then they need to catch up. So, and again, that loop continues.
It becomes a vicious circle.
Yeah, it's always, I feel, about trying to take that step back and reflect, taking the time to take the step back and reflect. And ultimately, again, that's, so I suppose why I have a career is because if everybody could do that, then people like me wouldn't exist. It wouldn't be necessary. But people don't take the time to sit back and reflect. What people do is they react. And particularly as you get older and you have a family, you're going to react to their benefit before your own. And that goes back to that same old analogy that I've used countless times, the being on the airplane and they tell you that when the oxygen mask drops, that you must put it on yourself before you help anyone else.
That's true, isn't it?
And that's logically what everyone would do. And the reality, your kid is sitting there screaming for their life and they're grabbing for an oxygen mask and you haven't got yours on yet. You care more about your child than you do about yourself. You would go and put the oxygen mask on the kid, probably, in the moment. You might tell yourself differently, but in the moment, you probably would. And it's the same with life, you know, like your kid needs fed before you need fed. Your kid needs exercise and what have you before you need it. Your friends need your time and attention and looking after before you need time and attention and looking after. And so you always end up putting yourself last in the moment. And the only way that you...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that we are finishing on this idea that whatever you do, whether it's just a small thing, starting today, whether it's looking at your water intake or your sugar habits or whatever it is, just take that little time for yourself to self-care. So how should people go about chatting with you if they want their own, if they want to start their own personal well-being?
Well, I'd say that the first thing to do is just go to the website, dcsfit.com, read some of the articles, download the nutrition guide. It's all free. I don't expect anybody to go from this and say, hey, I'm going to go and hire Mark. Just go and take the free stuff and see what you can do with it, because ultimately there is no point in just jumping into anything. It is just trying to find all these bits and pieces. So I would suggest just go to the website, have a look at the content that's on there already. We do have a YouTube channel as well that's got some stuff on it, and I do intend to do a bit more on that soon, which is Dynamic Core Studios on YouTube. And yeah, I'm just going to keep trying to put out more and more content for everyone to use. When it gets to me, there's contact forms on the website, so if somebody actually wants to get in touch, then just use one of those and send me an email. And at that point, it's just a case of trying to chat something through. I don't really take on clients willy-nilly. I want to talk to people first and see if I can just help in a short conversation. And if we can do that, then you don't need me.
I have to say, I mean, you're the first personal trainer I've ever heard saying there is a way to fitness that doesn't involve no pain, no gain. So I think that recommends you amongst people like me who don't like to be suffering on a daily basis for their well-being.
No, it's not meant to be, and we'll not go off on a huge other tangent, but the whole thing of like, if you're not sore the next day, then it hasn't done you any good is a bit of a fallacy. There are always going to be times when it hurts when you're doing something new, but as your body adjusts to it, but that shouldn't be the norm.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your time.
It's a pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your day. It was good to catch up with you.
And you.
See you soon.
I'll speak to you next time. Bye.
Bye.